The first warning Nathaniel Ashcroft received about Genevieve Carter arrived before he ever set foot on her father's estate. It came wrapped in polished manners and delivered with a laugh. "You will not enjoy meeting her," Lord Whitmore had remarked over brandy in London. "The woman behaves more like a stable manager than a lady." Others had eagerly joined the conversation. Genevieve was stubborn. Genevieve was difficult. Genevieve spent more time with horses than people. Genevieve had frightened away several respectable suitors. By the end of the evening, Nathaniel had formed a clear picture of the woman he was supposedly expected to consider as a future duchess. Then, 3 days later, he realized every one of them might have been lying. The carriage rolled through the iron gates of Carter Estate shortly after sunrise on a cool April morning. A thin mist drifted across the fields. Dew sparkled on the grass. The estate stretched across hundreds of acres of rolling countryside beneath a pale blue sky. From a distance, the manor house looked impressive. Closer inspection revealed signs of neglect. Several stone walls needed repair. One section of fencing leaned noticeably. Even from the road, Nathaniel could see workers already busy throughout the property. He sat quietly inside the carriage while his longtime friend Oliver Pembroke watched him with obvious amusement. "You still have time to abandon this ridiculous plan." Nathaniel adjusted the plain brown coat he had chosen for his disguise. "It is not ridiculous." Oliver laughed. "You are a duke." "Correct. And you intend to pretend to be a stable hand. Temporarily. You could simply visit as yourself." Nathaniel looked out the window. "If I arrive as the Duke of Ashcroft, nobody will show me the truth." Oliver shook his head. "One day your curiosity is going to cause trouble." Nathaniel smiled faintly. Probably. The decision had already been made. His late mother had known the Carter family. A possible marriage had been mentioned years ago. After reaching adulthood, Nathaniel found himself repeatedly hearing Genevieve Carter's name. Unfortunately, every account seemed contradictory. Some praised her intelligence. Others criticized her independence. Some described her as hardworking. Others called her impossible. Nathaniel preferred facts to rumors, so he had created a plan. He would spend several weeks at Carter Estate disguised as a worker. He would observe, learn, decide for himself. The carriage stopped beside a cluster of service buildings near the rear of the property. Oliver climbed out first. Nathaniel followed. A cool breeze carried the scent of damp earth and horses. Nearby, several stable workers were already beginning their morning routines. "Remember," Oliver said quietly, "you are Alex Reed." "I know. Not your grace." "Obviously. Try not to sound educated." Nathaniel frowned. "I do not sound educated." Oliver stared at him. "You absolutely do." Before Nathaniel could respond, a broad-shouldered older man approached. Gray hair framed a weathered face. His expression suggested he had little patience for nonsense. "You must be the new hand." Nathaniel extended a hand. "Alex Reed." The man shook it firmly. "Samuel Brooks. I run the stables." His gaze swept over Nathaniel's posture, boots, and hands. "You worked around horses before?" "Yes." "Good." Samuel pointed toward the stable yard. "We are short-handed." Nathaniel nodded. "I can start immediately." Samuel grunted approvingly. "I like that answer." The morning passed quickly. Nathaniel mucked stalls, carried feed, brushed horses, and repaired tack. Physical labor never bothered him. His father had insisted he learn practical skills despite his title. Several workers spoke freely around him. That was precisely what he wanted. Information flowed more easily when people believed you were unimportant. By mid-morning, he had already heard Genevieve Carter mentioned 6 times. None of the conversations matched. "Miss Carter is the only reason this place still functions," one stable boy said while filling water buckets. 10 minutes later, another worker snorted. "She meddles in everything." Near noon, an older groundskeeper shook his head. "Best not get on Victoria Sinclair's bad side." Nathaniel glanced up. "Who is Victoria Sinclair?" "Miss Carter's cousin." The man lowered his voice. pretty smile, sharp teeth. The warning lingered in Nathaniel's thoughts. Shortly after noon, the stable yard erupted into sudden activity. A groom hurried from the manor. 2 maids crossed the courtyard carrying riding equipment. Workers straightened instinctively. Samuel muttered something under his breath. Nathaniel looked up from a saddle he had been cleaning. "What is happening, Miss Carter?" Samuel sounded almost resigned. "Inspecting the horses." Nathaniel expected an aristocratic lady accompanied by servants. Instead, a woman strode directly into the stable wearing practical riding clothes and carrying a notebook. She moved quickly, purposefully, confidently. Sunlight caught strands of golden-brown hair escaping from beneath her hat. Her posture was straight, her expression focused. She paused beside a chestnut mare and immediately noticed a loose buckle on the saddle. "Who checked this?" she asked. Nobody sounded frightened. Nobody rushed to make excuses. Yet several workers exchanged embarrassed glances. Genevieve fixed the buckle herself. "Please inspect all riding equipment again before evening." Her tone remained calm, professional. Nathaniel found himself staring. Not because she was beautiful, though she certainly was. Because she looked nothing like the woman described in London's drawing rooms. She moved through the stable speaking with workers by name, asking questions, listening carefully to answers. A young stable boy accidentally dropped a brush while hurrying past. Instead of scolding him, she picked it up and handed it back. "Slow down," she said gently. "You will work faster if you stop trying to rush." The boy smiled sheepishly. "Yes, ma'am." Nathaniel watched every interaction. Curiosity deepened with each passing minute. Then Genevieve reached his section of the stable. Her gaze settled on him briefly. "You are new." "Yes. Alex Reed." Nathaniel forced himself to sound casual. "Started this morning." She nodded once. "Can you saddle Midnight?" Nathaniel glanced toward the large black stallion occupying the far stall. Several workers nearby immediately looked uncomfortable. "The stallion?" "Yes. Of course." A faint smile touched her lips. "Good. Everyone else keeps trying to convince me he is difficult." Nathaniel approached the horse. Midnight snorted once but remained cooperative. Within minutes, the saddle was secure. When he led the stallion into the courtyard, Genevieve looked genuinely impressed. "That was fast." "He is not difficult." "Thank you." She accepted the reins. Then something happened that immediately changed Nathaniel's opinion of Carter Estate. A young, aristocratic visitor emerged from the manor steps. Expensive clothing, perfect posture, arrogance practically radiating from him. "There you are, Genevieve." His voice carried easily across the courtyard. "Everyone is looking for you." Genevieve's expression cooled slightly. "I was working." The man laughed. Again. Several nearby guests joined him. "One would think you were applying for employment." More laughter followed. Nathaniel saw Genevieve's shoulders stiffen. Only slightly. Most people would not have noticed. He did. "The horses need attention," she replied calmly. "Surely that is what stable hands are for." The young man gestured toward Nathaniel and the others. "Unless you enjoy doing their jobs." More laughter. Nobody intervened. Not the guests. Not the servants. Not even the older gentleman standing near the manor entrance who Nathaniel assumed must be Lord Carter. Genevieve stood alone beneath dozens of watching eyes. "Someone should ensure the work is done properly," she said. "How admirable." The young man smiled. "Although I imagine it makes finding a husband rather difficult." Another wave of amusement spread through the courtyard. Nathaniel felt anger rise instantly. The comments were not devastating individually. Together they formed something uglier. Public humiliation disguised as humor. Genevieve's cheeks flushed slightly, yet she neither retreated nor argued. "If a man is frightened by competence," she replied evenly, "he is unlikely to be useful." Several workers struggled to hide smiles. The young aristocrat looked annoyed. Genevieve mounted Midnight smoothly. Before turning away, she glanced briefly toward Nathaniel. For just an instant, He saw something behind her composed expression. Weariness. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Weariness. The look vanished immediately. She guided the stallion toward the far fields and disappeared beyond a line of trees. Conversation resumed around the courtyard. Guests laughed. Workers returned to their tasks. Life continued as though nothing important had happened. Nathaniel remained where he was, staring toward the distant fields. Samuel appeared beside him. "Now you have met Miss Carter." "Apparently." The older man folded his arms. "What do you think?" Nathaniel considered the question carefully. Less than an hour earlier, he had been evaluating a potential bride. Now something else entirely occupied his thoughts. "I think," he said slowly, "that she seems different from what people say." Samuel laughed once. "You noticed that quickly." Nathaniel watched the empty road where Genevieve had disappeared. The rumors, the ridicule, the strange silence from her father. None of it made sense yet. But for the first time since arriving at Carter Estate, he was no longer interested in determining whether Genevieve Carter would make a suitable duchess. He wanted to know why so many people seemed determined to convince the world she was someone she clearly was not. By the end of his third day at Carter Estate, Nathaniel had reached a conclusion that surprised him. The hardest working person on the property was not a manager, an accountant, or even Lord Carter himself. It was Genevieve Carter. The realization came gradually. At dawn, she reviewed livestock records. Before breakfast, she inspected damaged fencing along the western pasture. By mid-morning, she met with tenant families about drainage problems affecting several fields. In the afternoon, she checked supply inventories, examined repair requests, and somehow found time to visit the stables again. Nathaniel saw enough to recognize a pattern. Everyone depended on her. Very few appreciated it. The imbalance irritated him more each day. On a cool Thursday morning, he was repairing a gate near the southern orchard when he noticed Genevieve standing with 3 tenant farmers. She listened carefully while one elderly man explained concerns about a flooded section of land. Rather than dismissing the problem, she pulled a notebook from her pocket and began asking questions. Detailed questions. Practical questions. By the time the conversation ended, she already had a solution. "If we redirect the drainage trench another 20 feet, the water should move away from the lower field," she said. "I will speak with the grounds crew this afternoon." Relief spread across the farmer's face. "Thank you, Miss Carter." Genevieve smiled. "You have thanked me 3 times already. Then I'll make it 4. The man tipped his hat. Most people don't listen. Nathaniel watched from a distance. The interaction seemed ordinary, yet something about it stayed with him. Later that same afternoon, he learned why. Lord Carter held a meeting inside the manor's small conference room. Nathaniel happened to be delivering crates of accounting records to an adjacent office when the door remained partially open. Voices drifted into the hallway. "Excellent work on the drainage proposal," one local landowner said. "Your estate continues improving every year." Lord Carter accepted the compliment easily. "We do our best." Nathaniel stopped walking. The proposal, the one Genevieve had created only hours earlier. Another guest nodded approvingly. "Your management has been impressive." Lord Carter smiled. "Thank you." Not once did he mention his daughter. Not once. Nathaniel stood motionless outside the room. Perhaps he had misunderstood. Perhaps Genevieve preferred staying out of public discussions. Then another voice spoke. "I heard Miss Carter was involved." An uncomfortable silence followed. Nathaniel immediately paid closer attention. Lord Carter cleared his throat. "Genevieve enjoys involving herself in estate matters." The phrasing bothered him instantly. Enjoys involving herself. As though her work were a hobby rather than the foundation keeping the estate functional. The conversation moved on. Nathaniel remained in the hallway for several seconds before continuing toward the records office. His mood darkened considerably. That evening, he found Samuel cleaning tack inside the stable. "Can I ask something?" The older man glanced up. "You just did." Nathaniel ignored the joke. "Does Lord Carter always take credit for Genevieve's work?" Samuel snorted. You noticed that too. So the answer is yes. Mostly. Samuel adjusted a leather strap. Miss Carter solves problems. Lord Carter attends meetings. Nathaniel frowned. And nobody says anything? Some of us do. Samuel shrugged. Nobody important listens. The answer left a bitter taste in Nathaniel's mouth. The next day offered another example. Carter Estate hosted a luncheon for several neighboring families. Guests filled the gardens behind the manor. Tables overflowed with food. Laughter drifted through the afternoon air. Nathaniel spent most of the event assisting stable staff. Still, he remained close enough to observe. Genevieve moved through the gathering with polite professionalism. She greeted guests, answered questions, helped elderly visitors navigate uneven pathways. She seemed to know everyone's name, yet something felt strange. The more she contributed, the less recognition she received. The contrast became impossible to ignore when Victoria Sinclair arrived. Nathaniel recognized her immediately. Tall, elegant, beautiful. Her smile dazzled nearly everyone she encountered. At first glance, she appeared charming. Then Nathaniel watched her more carefully. Victoria possessed a talent for subtle cruelty. She complimented people while quietly diminishing someone else. She redirected conversations toward herself. She planted ideas without appearing responsible for them. Most guests never noticed. Nathaniel did. During one conversation, a visiting woman praised improvements to the estate's crop yields. The harvest reports have been remarkable. Victoria smiled pleasantly. Genevieve certainly enjoys pretending she is a farmer. Several guests laughed. The comment sounded harmless. It was not. Nathaniel noticed Genevieve standing only a few feet away. She heard every word. Her smile never faltered. Neither did Victoria's. Later, another guest admired the newly repaired tenant cottages. Someone has clearly invested significant effort. Victoria sipped tea. My cousin becomes quite obsessed with projects. Again, the words sounded innocent. Again, they diminished real accomplishments. Nathaniel began understanding how reputations were destroyed. Not through obvious attacks, through thousands of small cuts. By late afternoon, he had witnessed at least 6 similar incidents. Each one left Genevieve slightly more isolated. Each one allowed Victoria to appear gracious while subtly encouraging ridicule. The most frustrating part was Genevieve's response. She never defended herself. She simply continued helping others, as though she had grown accustomed to being overlooked. That realization bothered Nathaniel more than he expected. 2 days later, another incident pushed his irritation into genuine anger. A section of fencing collapsed near the northern pasture. Several horses escaped into neighboring fields. Workers rushed in every direction attempting to regain control. Nathaniel joined the effort immediately. For nearly 3 hours, the estate descended into organized chaos. Throughout the entire situation, Genevieve coordinated everything. She assigned search teams, directed repairs, contacted neighboring landowners. By sunset, every horse had been recovered safely. The damaged fence had already been partially rebuilt. The crisis ended because Genevieve managed it effectively. That evening, Lord Carter hosted a dinner for several guests still visiting the estate. Nathaniel happened to be carrying supplies through a nearby corridor when he overheard conversation from the dining room. I understand there was a problem with the horses today, someone remarked. Nothing serious, Lord Carter replied. We handled it. Nathaniel stopped walking. Another guest laughed. A testament to strong leadership. Lord Carter accepted the praise without hesitation. I appreciate that. Nathaniel stared at the closed door. Genevieve had spent 6 exhausting hours solving the problem. Yet once again, she received nothing. No acknowledgement, no gratitude, nothing. Later that night, he found her alone near the stables checking on one of the recovered horses. Lantern light illuminated the quiet yard. The mare appeared calm now. Genevieve gently brushed its neck. Nathaniel approached slowly. Everything all right? She looked over. The horse is fine. I meant you. Surprise flickered briefly across her face. That is unusually thoughtful for a stable hand. I have my moments. A faint smile appeared. So I've noticed. Silence settled comfortably between them. The mare nudged Genevieve's shoulder. She laughed softly and scratched behind its ears. The sound caught Nathaniel off guard. It was genuine, unforced, beautiful. You spent all day fixing someone else's mistake, he said. Genevieve shrugged. The fence needed repair. Still, she looked toward the dark fields beyond the stable yard. There is always something that needs repair. The answer felt heavier than it should have. Nathaniel studied her expression. Does that ever bother you? What? Doing the work and letting someone else take credit. For a moment he thought she might refuse to answer. Instead, she smiled sadly. You notice more than most people. Nathaniel said nothing. Genevieve rested one hand against the stall door. When I was younger, it bothered me constantly. Her voice softened. Now I try not to think about it. That does not sound healthy. She laughed. Probably not. The humor faded quickly. The truth is that arguments rarely change anything. Nathaniel felt frustration rise again. Sometimes they should. Genevieve met his gaze. Something vulnerable appeared there for just an instant. Sometimes. Then it disappeared. Footsteps echoed across the courtyard. A servant approached carrying a stack of correspondence. Miss Carter. Genevieve straightened immediately. Yes. Your father would like these reports reviewed before tomorrow morning. The servant handed her several folders. Nathaniel glanced at the documents. Estate finances, crop records, infrastructure assessments, hours of work. Genevieve accepted them without complaint. Thank you. The servant departed. Nathaniel looked at the stack. You are reviewing all of that tonight? Most likely. It is nearly dark. I noticed. And your father asked you to do it? Requested. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Genevieve smiled knowingly. You do not like him very much. I barely know him. Yet. Nathaniel considered lying. Decided against it. Yet. Her smile widened slightly. Careful, Alex. Why? You are starting to sound protective. Before he could formulate a response, she gathered the reports and turned toward the manor. Halfway across the courtyard, she paused. Good night. Good night. Nathaniel watched her disappear through the rear entrance. Then he looked toward the brightly lit windows of Lord Carter's study. For the first time since arriving at Carter Estate, he found himself wondering whether the real mystery was not Genevieve Carter at all. The real mystery was why everyone around her seemed so comfortable taking everything she gave while offering almost nothing in return. And the more he observed, the more certain he became that someone inside that estate benefited from keeping her exactly where she was. Overworked, undervalued, and far too busy to ask the questions she perhaps should have been asking. 3 days later, Nathaniel discovered that every estate carried secrets. Carter Estate simply hid theirs more carefully than most. The discovery began with a single look. A look so brief that almost anyone else would have missed it. Genevieve did not. Nathaniel certainly did not. The moment occurred on a cloudy afternoon inside the manor library. He had been asked to deliver several boxes of archived account books from a storage building behind the house. It was tedious work. Dust covered everything. Most of the ledgers appeared decades old. Nathaniel carried the final box through the library doorway just as Genevieve entered from the opposite side. She looked tired. More tired than usual. A notebook rested beneath one arm. Several folded documents occupied the other hand. At the large desk near the windows sat Lord Carter and Victoria Sinclair. They appeared to be reviewing financial reports. Genevieve approached them directly. Father, I found another reference to the South Bridge repairs. The reaction was immediate. Lord Carter froze. Only for a second. Yet Nathaniel saw it. So did Genevieve. Victoria recovered first. The bridge again? Her smile appeared effortless. You have always been fascinated by that accident. Genevieve ignored the comment. There are inconsistencies in the records. She placed a document on the desk. Several maintenance reports are missing. Silence followed. Lord Carter glanced at the paper, then looked away. The accident happened years ago. I know. There is no reason to revisit it. Nathaniel pretended to organize books nearby while listening carefully. Genevieve remained calm. I am not revisiting the accident. I am trying to understand why certain records disappeared. Victoria laughed lightly. Perhaps because nobody imagined you would investigate old bridge paperwork someday. The joke sounded harmless. Yet Nathaniel noticed something interesting. Victoria never answered the actual question. Neither did Lord Carter. Genevieve noticed it too. The missing records begin 6 months before the collapse. Coincidence? Victoria said immediately. Genevieve looked unconvinced. Lord Carter stood. That is enough. The firmness in his voice surprised everyone. Even himself, judging by his expression afterward. There are more important matters requiring attention. Genevieve stared at him. I only asked a question. And I answered it. No, the word emerged quietly. You did not. Silence filled the room. Nathaniel felt tension settle across the library. Lord Carter turned away first. The discussion is finished. Genevieve remained motionless for several seconds. Then she gathered her documents. Very well. Her voice sounded perfectly polite. That somehow made the moment worse. She left without another word. Nathaniel watched her go. Then he glanced toward Lord Carter. The older man's face looked troubled. Victoria's looked relieved. That difference stayed with him long after the conversation ended. Later that evening, rain threatened across the western horizon. Dark clouds gathered above the fields. Workers hurried to finish outdoor tasks before the weather arrived. Nathaniel spent the afternoon repairing equipment inside the stable. Shortly before sunset, Genevieve appeared carrying a lantern and several folders. She headed toward a small office attached to the stable. Nathaniel hesitated only briefly before following. The office door stood partially open. Genevieve sat at a desk covered with maps, maintenance reports, and financial records. She looked up when he knocked. You need something? No, Nathaniel nodded toward the papers. You looked busy. A faint smile appeared. An accurate observation. He stepped inside. More bridge research? Surprise flickered across her face. How did you know? I overheard part of the library conversation. Genevieve sighed. Then you also heard me being dismissed. Nathaniel leaned against the doorway. You seemed frustrated. I am. She tapped one of the documents. The more records I review, the stranger everything becomes. Nathaniel glanced at the papers. How so? Genevieve hesitated, then apparently decided she trusted him enough to answer. The official explanation never made sense. The bridge collapse? She nodded. The structure was inspected regularly. Her finger traced several entries. Maintenance requests existed. Repair recommendations existed. She looked up. Then suddenly there is almost no documentation at all. Nathaniel frowned. And after the accident? Records return. She shook her head. It is as though someone removed an entire section of history. The observation sent a chill through him. Why would anyone do that? That is exactly what I would like to know. Rain began tapping softly against the windows. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Nathaniel asked the question he had been considering for days. Why does it matter so much? Genevieve looked down at the documents. When she finally answered, her voice sounded quieter. More vulnerable. Because I was there. Nathaniel straightened slightly. At the bridge. She nodded. The day it collapsed. Silence settled heavily between them. I did not know that. Genevieve laughed softly. Most people do. Her gaze drifted toward the rain outside. They simply do not mention it. Nathaniel suddenly understood something. The accident was not merely estate history. It was personal. Deeply personal. You were injured. It was not a question. Genevieve touched her left arm unconsciously. Yes. The motion lasted only a second. Still, he noticed. Badly? Enough. She offered a small smile. I survived. Nathaniel studied her expression. Something remained hidden there. Pain, uncertainty, questions unanswered for years. You think the missing records are connected? Genevieve met his gaze. I do. And your father does not want you investigating. Apparently. Rain intensified outside. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance. Genevieve gathered several papers and returned them to a folder. Perhaps I am wrong. Nathaniel immediately shook his head. You do not believe that. No, her smile turned wry. I really do not. The conversation might have continued longer if another voice had not interrupted. There you are. Victoria stood in the doorway holding an umbrella. Her appearance seemed oddly convenient. Nathaniel noticed Genevieve noticing the same thing. I have been looking everywhere for you, Victoria said. Genevieve closed the folder. Why? Your father needs tomorrow's tenant reports. They are already finished. Victoria's smile never changed. Wonderful. Her gaze shifted briefly toward the documents on the desk. Working late again? Genevieve followed the glance. Something like that. An uncomfortable silence followed. Victoria eventually stepped aside. Do not stay up too late. After she left, Genevieve remained seated. Nathaniel looked toward the doorway. Interesting timing. Very. Genevieve stared at the closed folder. She always seems to appear whenever I start asking questions. Nathaniel's attention sharpened instantly. Always. Not always. She considered it. Often enough that I have noticed. The observation lingered between them. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Nathaniel changed the subject. You should go home before the storm gets worse. Genevieve smiled faintly. That sounded suspiciously like concern. Maybe I am learning bad habits. From whom? Nathaniel looked directly at her. You. The answer surprised her. It also pleased her, judging by the brief warmth that entered her expression. Good night, Alex. Good night. She left carrying the folder of bridge documents. Nathaniel remained behind watching rain streak across the windows. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Missing records. Defensive reactions. Convenient interruptions. None of it proved anything. Yet together they formed the outline of a mystery. The following morning brought another clue. A small one. Easy to overlook. Nathaniel was helping unload lumber near the carriage house when an elderly groundskeeper named Walter approached. The old man had worked at Carter Estate longer than almost anyone. His memory stretched back decades. You are the new fellow, Walter said. Alex. That is right. Walter nodded. You spend time around Miss Carter. Nathaniel shrugged. Sometimes. The old man looked around carefully before lowering his voice. She still asks about the bridge? Nathaniel's pulse quickened. Occasionally. Walter sighed heavily. Just like her mother. That immediately caught Nathaniel's attention. Her mother. The old man realized his mistake too late. Forget I said anything. He started to leave. Nathaniel stepped forward. Wait. Walter stopped reluctantly. What did you mean? The groundskeeper stared toward the distant fields. Years ago, before the accident, Lady Carter asked questions too. Silence followed. About what? Walter shook his head. I do not know. But I remember this. His weathered face tightened. After she died, nobody mentioned those questions again. Nathaniel felt a chill despite the warm morning air. And the bridge? Walter looked away. Some things are safer buried. Then he walked off without another word. Nathaniel remained standing beside the lumber pile long after the conversation ended. Because for the first time, the mystery felt larger than missing paperwork. Larger than a collapsed bridge. Larger even than Genevieve realized. Somewhere inside Carter Estate, hidden beneath years of silence, lay a truth important enough that multiple people seemed determined to keep it buried. And the more Genevieve searched for answers, the more certain Nathaniel became that someone was watching every step she took. The storm arrived faster than anyone expected. By late afternoon, dark clouds had swallowed the sky above Carter Estate. Wind bent the treetops. Stable doors rattled. Workers hurried across the grounds securing equipment before the worst of the weather arrived. Nathaniel stood near the western paddocks helping Samuel move several horses into sheltered barns. Thunder rolled across the countryside. "That one looks ugly," Samuel muttered, glancing toward the horizon. Nathaniel followed his gaze. A wall of rain advanced across distant fields. "How long before it reaches us?" 10 minutes. Samuel frowned. "Maybe less." The first heavy drops began falling before either man could continue the conversation. Within moments, rain hammered the rooftops. Horses shifted nervously inside their stalls. Wind howled through gaps in the stable walls. Workers retreated toward shelter. Nathaniel was securing the final gate when he noticed something that immediately felt wrong. One horse was missing. Midnight, Genevieve's black stallion. His attention sharpened instantly. "Samuel." The older man looked up. "What?" "Midnight is not here." Samuel swore under his breath. "Miss Carter took him out an hour ago." Nathaniel stared into the rain. "She has not returned." For a brief moment, both men remained silent. Then another flash of lightning illuminated the fields beyond the estate. Samuel's expression darkened. "Damn!" Nathaniel was already moving. "Where would she go?" "Northern Ridge." Samuel pointed toward the distant hills. "She inspects the drainage trenches after heavy rain." "In weather like this?" "Miss Carter does a lot of things in weather like this." Nathaniel grabbed a waterproof coat hanging near the stable entrance. "I will find her. Take a lantern. The wind will kill it." Samuel hesitated, then nodded. "Fair point." Rain soaked Nathaniel within seconds of leaving the stable. Water streamed across the muddy roads. Thunder cracked overhead. Visibility dropped dramatically. Most sensible people would have remained indoors. Genevieve Carter rarely behaved like most people. Nathaniel headed toward the northern ridge. The journey took longer than expected. Mud slowed every step. Gusts of wind pushed against him constantly. Twice he nearly lost his footing. Yet he continued forward. Something deep inside him refused to turn back. Half an hour later, he finally spotted movement through the rain. A horse. Then another. Relief hit immediately. Genevieve sat atop Midnight near a damaged section of drainage trench. She appeared completely focused on the flooded terrain. Nathaniel almost laughed. Only Genevieve would inspect infrastructure during a storm. Then the horse slipped. Not badly. Just enough to send mud cascading beneath its hooves. Genevieve reacted quickly. Too quickly. Midnight recovered. She did not. Nathaniel watched her lose balance. Her right foot slipped from the stirrup. The stallion shifted sideways. Genevieve managed to stay mounted. Barely. By the time Nathaniel reached her, she was breathing hard. "What are you doing here?" she called over the wind. "Looking for you." "Why?" "Because there is a storm." Genevieve blinked rainwater from her eyes. "I noticed." Clearly not enough. The answer surprised a laugh out of her. That sounded almost angry. It was. She shook her head. The drainage trench failed. Nathaniel stared at her. "Genevieve." "What?" "You nearly fell." For a brief second, something passed through her expression. Not fear. Recognition. As though she understood why that mattered. Then she looked away. "I am fine." Lightning flashed again. This time much closer. Thunder followed almost instantly. Nathaniel glanced toward the sky. "We need shelter. The manor is 3 miles away." "Then somewhere closer." Genevieve pointed toward a line of trees. "There is an old hunting lodge." Rain intensified. Neither argued further. 20 minutes later, they reached the lodge. The small stone building stood hidden among dense woods. Time had weathered the structure, but it remained sturdy. Genevieve pushed open the door. They entered together. Wind rattled the shutters. Rain hammered the roof. Inside, however, the lodge remained dry and surprisingly comfortable. A stone fireplace occupied one wall. Old furniture rested beneath protective cloths. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Nathaniel immediately began building a fire. Genevieve removed her soaked riding gloves. You have done that before. A few times. Flames soon flickered inside the hearth. Warmth slowly spread through the room. Genevieve sat near the fire while Nathaniel hung their wet coats nearby. For several minutes, neither spoke. The storm provided more than enough noise. Eventually Genevieve broke the silence. "Thank you." Nathaniel looked over. "For what?" "Coming after me. Someone had to." A faint smile appeared. "You really are protective. Maybe you are really reckless." She laughed softly. The sound lingered in the warm, firelit room. Nathaniel found himself smiling in return. The moment felt unexpectedly peaceful. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the world seemed smaller somehow. Simpler. Genevieve stretched one leg carefully toward the fire. A brief wince crossed her face. Nathaniel noticed immediately. "What happened?" "Nothing." "That was not convincing." Genevieve sighed. "My knee." "From the horse." "No," she looked down at the flames. "From years ago." Nathaniel's attention sharpened. "The bridge." Her eyes lifted slowly. "How did you know?" "You touched the same leg when we discussed the accident." Silence followed. Genevieve studied him carefully. "You really do notice everything." Nathaniel sat across from her. "Tell me." For several moments, she stared into the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded distant. "I was 17. Rain struck the windows. Thunder echoed through the woods. Yet Nathaniel heard every word clearly. The bridge had been damaged for months." Genevieve folded her hands together. "People complained. Workers complained. Travelers complained." Her expression hardened slightly. "Nothing happened." Nathaniel remained silent. Genevieve continued. "The collapse occurred during heavy rain." She laughed softly. Ironically, not unlike today. The humor faded quickly. "I remember the sound most clearly." Her gaze drifted toward the flames. "Wood breaking." Pause followed. "Then water." Nathaniel felt something tighten in his chest. Not because of the accident itself. Because of the way she described it. Carefully. As though she had told herself the story many times. "The doctor said I was lucky." She touched her knee unconsciously. "Several months of recovery. Years of stiffness afterward." Nathaniel watched her closely. "And questions." Genevieve looked surprised. "Questions? You are still searching for answers." The fire crackled softly between them. Genevieve smiled sadly. "Yes." The admission came easily now. "Because something never felt right." "About the collapse?" "About everything." She leaned back slightly. "The missing records. My father's reaction. Victoria's interruptions." Her expression darkened. "Even my mother's questions before she died." Nathaniel remembered Walter's warning. "Some things are safer buried." "You think they are connected?" Genevieve stared into the fire. "I think somebody wants me to stop looking." Silence followed. Heavy silence. Nathaniel considered everything he had observed since arriving at Carter Estate. Missing documents. Strange reactions. Convenient distractions. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Another gust of wind shook the lodge. Genevieve shifted slightly in her chair. Her riding skirt moved just enough for Nathaniel to glimpse a pale scar extending along part of her lower leg. Not dramatic. Not disfiguring. Simply real. A permanent reminder of a day that still haunted her. Genevieve noticed his gaze. For an instant, embarrassment flickered across her face. She lowered the fabric automatically. Nathaniel looked away. "I am sorry." "Why?" "I should not have stared." To his surprise, Genevieve smiled. "Most people do. That does not make it polite." Her smile softened. No, a long moment passed. Then she spoke again. Quietly this time. "I used to hate it." Nathaniel met her gaze. "The scar." She nodded. "When I was younger, I thought it ruined everything." The vulnerability in her voice caught him off guard. "It does not." Genevieve laughed gently. "You are very bad at pretending to be a stable hand sometimes." Nathaniel felt a dangerous spark of amusement. "Why?" "Because stable hands do not usually sound like philosophers. That is disappointing. For you, perhaps. They both smiled. Outside, the storm continued. Yet something had changed inside the lodge. A barrier had disappeared. Not entirely. Just enough. Genevieve no longer seemed like a distant mystery. She seemed human. Hurt. Strong. Lonely. Nathaniel realized something unsettling then. He had come to Carter Estate to evaluate a potential bride. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped evaluating anything. Instead, he had started caring. The realization unsettled him more than the storm. Hours later, the rain finally began weakening. The worst of the weather had passed. Darkness settled across the woods outside. Genevieve stood first. "We should head back." Nathaniel nodded. Neither seemed eager to leave. Neither acknowledged that fact. They collected their coats and prepared the horses. Just before opening the lodge door, Genevieve paused. "Alex." "Yes." She hesitated. "Thank you." The words carried more weight than before. Nathaniel understood immediately. Not for finding her. Not for the fire. Not even for the conversation. For listening. Anytime. A faint smile touched her lips. Then they stepped into the cool night air together. Behind them, the fire slowly faded inside the hunting lodge. Ahead of them, the mysteries of Carter Estate remained unresolved. Yet as they rode back beneath clearing skies, Genevieve did not know that one mystery had just become far more dangerous. Because for the first time since arriving under a false name, Nathaniel Ashcroft was beginning to forget why he had come at all. The days following the storm settled into a strange rhythm. Outwardly, life at Carter Estate continued as it always had. Workers repaired fences. Tenants tended fields. Guests arrived and departed. Meals were served. Meetings were held. Yet beneath the surface something had shifted. At least for Nathaniel. Every time he saw Genevieve crossing a courtyard or reviewing records beneath a tree, he found himself remembering the hunting lodge. The firelight. The honesty. The scar she no longer tried quite so hard to hide. Most unsettling of all was the realization that he now looked for her without meaning to. He noticed her absence before he noticed her presence. That fact alone should have concerned him. Unfortunately, it did not. The following week brought the arrival of Charles Pembroke. Nathaniel recognized the name immediately. Charles belonged to a respected family with extensive holdings several counties away. Intelligent, well-educated, widely admired. Unfortunately, he was also handsome, confident, and precisely the sort of man who attracted attention the moment he entered a room. Nathaniel disliked him within 10 minutes. Not because Charles had done anything wrong. Because Genevieve smiled when she saw him. The realization struck with surprising force. Nathaniel was brushing midnight near the stable yard when a carriage rolled toward the manor. Several servants hurried forward. Genevieve happened to be crossing the courtyard carrying estate reports. The moment Charles stepped from the carriage, her expression transformed. Not dramatically, not romantically, simply warmly, like someone greeting an old friend. Charles spotted her immediately. "Genevieve." His voice carried easily across the courtyard. She laughed. "Charles." Within moments they were talking as though no time had passed at all. Nathaniel focused very carefully on the horse. Samuel appeared beside him. "You look annoyed." "I am brushing a horse." "You are attacking the horse with a brush." Nathaniel glanced over. Samuel smirked knowingly. "That would be Charles Pembroke." "So I gathered." "Good man." Nathaniel grunted. Samuel's smile widened. "Very good man. You seem unusually invested in this conversation." "I am." Samuel folded his arms. "Because I have not seen Miss Carter smile like that in months." The statement should not have bothered Nathaniel. Yet somehow it did. More than it should have. Far more. Over the next several days, Charles became a frequent presence throughout the estate. Unlike many visiting gentlemen, he treated Genevieve as an equal. He asked her opinions, listened to her answers, remembered details from previous conversations. More importantly, he openly respected her work. Nathaniel witnessed the difference almost immediately. During a luncheon on the manor terrace, One guest joked that Genevieve spent too much time worrying about agricultural reports. Before she could respond, Charles smiled politely. Considering those reports increased the estate's productivity by nearly 15%, I would say the concern is justified. Silence followed. The guest changed the subject. Genevieve looked genuinely surprised. Nathaniel noticed that too. Later that same afternoon, Charles accompanied Genevieve during an inspection of tenant cottages. Nathaniel happened to be repairing a gate nearby. Their conversation drifted across the summer air. "The roof repairs look excellent," Charles said. "You remember the old condition?" Genevieve asked. "I remember buckets catching rainwater." She laughed softly. "That was awful. That was your improvement." Charles looked toward the cottages. "The tenants still talk about it." Genevieve seemed uncomfortable with the praise. "Many people helped. You organized it." Charles smiled. "You should take credit occasionally." Nathaniel tightened a bolt harder than necessary. The gate did nothing to deserve such treatment. A few days later, another development complicated matters further. Genevieve began spending more time with Charles. Not excessive amounts. Not enough to attract scandal. Enough to attract attention. Nathaniel hated discovering that he noticed every instance. He noticed when Charles carried books for her. He noticed when they laughed together during dinner. He noticed when Genevieve appeared happier after speaking with him. Worst of all, he noticed that Charles seemed genuinely fond of her. There was nothing superficial about it. No hidden agenda. No pursuit of status. Charles simply appreciated Genevieve, which made Nathaniel's growing resentment feel remarkably unreasonable. One evening, shortly before sunset, he found himself working alone near the orchard when Genevieve appeared carrying a basket of documents. "There you are." Nathaniel looked up. "Was someone searching for me?" "Actually, yes." Her smile appeared playful. "I need help." "With estate records?" "Worse." "That sounds concerning." She laughed. "Come with me." Curious despite himself, Nathaniel followed her along a narrow path winding through the orchard. Warm evening sunlight filtered through rows of apple trees. Birds chirped overhead. The peaceful setting contrasted sharply with the constant pressures of the estate. Eventually Genevieve stopped beside a damaged section of fencing. Several boards leaned at awkward angles. "The culprit is over there." Nathaniel followed her gaze. A stubborn goat stared back defiantly from 20 yards away. He blinked. "A goat. An escape artist. You brought me here for a goat." Genevieve nodded seriously. "The situation is dire." Nathaniel laughed despite himself. For the next 20 minutes, they attempted to guide the animal back toward its enclosure. The goat refused to cooperate. Repeatedly. By the time they finally succeeded, both were laughing. Real laughter. Easy laughter. The kind Nathaniel rarely experienced anymore. Genevieve rested against the fence, catching her breath. "I feel ridiculous." "You should. Thank you for your support." "Anytime." The smile lingering between them slowly faded into something quieter, more personal. Evening sunlight illuminated strands of hair escaping her riding hat. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then another voice interrupted. "I was beginning to wonder where you disappeared." Charles approached along the orchard path. Nathaniel immediately stepped back. The shift felt instinctive. Unpleasantly instinctive. Genevieve smiled. "We were dealing with an emergency." Charles glanced toward the goat. "I see. A dangerous criminal. Terrifying." Genevieve laughed again. Charles looked at her with obvious affection. Not possessive. Not dramatic. Simply genuine. Nathaniel suddenly felt like an intruder. The realization irritated him. Genevieve turned toward Charles. "Did you need something?" "Actually, yes." Charles reached into his coat and produced an elegant envelope. "My family is hosting a midsummer ball next week." Genevieve looked surprised. "Already? Time moves quickly." He offered the invitation. "I would be honored if you attended." Silence followed. Not awkward silence. Anticipatory silence. Nathaniel hated that he cared about her answer. "Thank you," Genevieve said. I would like that. Something tightened inside Nathaniel's chest. He immediately disliked the sensation. Charles smiled warmly. Excellent. After a few more minutes of conversation, Nathaniel excused himself and returned toward the stables. The evening no longer seemed quite as pleasant. Samuel found him there shortly afterward. You missed supper. I was not hungry. Samuel looked unconvinced. Interesting. Nathaniel began organizing equipment. Why? Because Miss Carter and Mr. Pembroke also missed supper. Nathaniel froze briefly. Samuel noticed. Ah! The older man nodded slowly. Now I understand. Understand what? Nothing. Samuel's expression suggested exactly the opposite. Absolutely nothing. Nathaniel abandoned the conversation before it could become even more irritating. Unfortunately, avoidance proved impossible over the next several days. Charles remained everywhere. During breakfast discussions, during property inspections, during evening walks through the gardens. Genevieve appeared increasingly comfortable around him. One afternoon, Nathaniel spotted them seated beneath an oak tree reviewing maps together. They looked happy. The sight should have reassured him. Charles was kind, respectful, intelligent, everything Genevieve deserved. Instead, the sight produced a feeling Nathaniel recognized immediately and disliked intensely. Jealousy. The realization arrived with uncomfortable clarity. He was jealous, not because Charles possessed superior qualities, not because Charles threatened his pride, because Genevieve mattered, far more than she should. That evening brought another unexpected development. Nathaniel was returning equipment to a storage building when he noticed Genevieve near the library entrance. She appeared distracted, thoughtful. He approached cautiously. Everything all right? She looked up. Maybe. That does not sound convincing. Genevieve held up a folded paper. I found something strange. Nathaniel's attention sharpened instantly. Related to the bridge? She nodded. A maintenance request. Missing records? Part of them. Her expression grew serious. This document should not exist. Why? Because according to official files, it was destroyed. Nathaniel stared at the paper. Yet here it is. Exactly. Excitement mixed with concern in her eyes. Someone hid it inside an unrelated ledger. The implications settled heavily between them. Another missing piece had surfaced. Another question demanded answers. Genevieve looked down at the document. The signature section is missing. Removed. Torn away. She exhaled slowly. But whoever submitted this request knew the bridge was unsafe months before the collapse. Nathaniel felt a chill despite the warm evening air. The mystery was deepening, and someone had gone to considerable effort to keep certain names hidden. Genevieve folded the paper carefully. I need to know who wrote it. Nathaniel watched determination harden behind her eyes. The same determination that had carried her through years of unanswered questions. The same determination that made him admire her more than he intended. You will find out, he said quietly. Genevieve looked at him for several seconds. Then she smiled. Not the polite smile she gave guests. Not the amused smile she shared with Charles. Something softer. Something that reached her eyes. Thank you. The moment lingered. Then footsteps echoed from inside the manor. Charles emerged carrying several books. Genevieve's attention shifted immediately. Nathaniel stepped back. Once again, he found himself watching the two of them together. Watching a future that seemed increasingly possible. And for the first time since arriving at Carter Estate, Nathaniel Ashcroft began to suspect that the greatest threat to his carefully constructed disguise was no longer the hidden truth about the bridge. It was the growing possibility that he was falling in love with the very woman he had originally come to judge. The discovery of the torn maintenance request changed everything. Not because it answered any questions, because it proved that someone had gone to considerable effort to hide the truth. During the days that followed, Genevieve became even more determined. Nathaniel noticed the difference immediately. She spent longer hours in the library. She reviewed old ledgers late into the evening. She questioned workers who had been employed at Carter Estate for decades. Most remembered very little. Others remembered enough to become uncomfortable. Every answer seemed to lead toward another missing piece. Meanwhile, something else began revealing itself. The mystery surrounding the bridge was not the only thing hidden beneath years of silence. The roots of Victoria Sinclair's resentment were beginning to show. Nathaniel first noticed it during a breakfast gathering attended by several neighboring families. Sunlight streamed through tall dining room windows. Conversations drifted between discussions of weather, harvest forecasts, and upcoming social events. Genevieve sat near the far end of the table reviewing notes while simultaneously answering questions about estate improvements. As usual, she handled everything with quiet competence. As usual, most people barely acknowledged it. Then one of the guests smiled toward her. "Miss Carter, I heard the drainage project was your idea. The neighboring farms have been praising the results for weeks." Genevieve looked surprised. "That is kind of them." Before she could say more, Victoria lifted her teacup. "Genevieve has always needed a project." Her tone sounded pleasant, friendly even. "When we were children, she organized everything. Gardens, games, charity events. It was exhausting." Laughter followed. Most guests smiled politely. Yet Nathaniel noticed something important. Genevieve's smile faded. "Only slightly." Victoria continued. "Some people enjoy being useful." Another guest nodded. "That sounds admirable." "Oh, it is." Victoria's expression remained flawless, although occasionally it leaves little room for more feminine interests. More laughter. Again, the comment sounded harmless. Again, it accomplished exactly what Victoria intended. Genevieve became less a capable woman and more an amusing curiosity. Nathaniel found himself studying Victoria carefully. The pattern had become impossible to ignore. Every compliment directed toward Genevieve eventually transformed into a criticism disguised as humor. Every achievement became a flaw. Every strength became a reason for ridicule. Yet Victoria never appeared cruel. That was the genius of it. She allowed other people to reach conclusions she quietly encouraged. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel witnessed another revealing moment. He was carrying supplies across the rear gardens when voices drifted from a nearby gazebo. He recognized Victoria immediately. Another woman sat across from her. One of the visiting guests. Nathaniel had no intention of eavesdropping. Then he heard Genevieve's name. He slowed instinctively. "You must admit she can be difficult," Victoria was saying. "Genevieve?" the woman asked. "She seems pleasant enough." Victoria sighed softly. "She means well." Pause followed. "But people rarely understand how exhausting it can be living beside someone who always needs to be admired." Nathaniel stopped completely. "Admired?" the guest repeated. "You know what I mean." Victoria laughed gently. "Everything becomes a responsibility. Everything becomes a mission. Sometimes the rest of us disappear." The words struck Nathaniel as strange. Not because they sounded malicious, because they sounded personal. Deeply personal. The guest eventually changed the subject. Victoria's smile returned. Yet Nathaniel remained thoughtful long after the conversation ended. That evening provided another clue. He found Genevieve alone in the library surrounded by stacks of documents. Candlelight illuminated the room. Outside, crickets sang in the summer darkness. "You missed dinner," Nathaniel said. Genevieve glanced up. "Did I?" "Apparently. I was busy." She gestured toward the papers. "The bridge investigation is becoming frustrating." Nathaniel pulled out a chair. "Any progress?" "Some." She rubbed her temple tiredly. "Not enough." Silence settled briefly. Then Nathaniel asked a question that had been bothering him for days. "Have you and Victoria always been close?" Genevieve looked genuinely surprised. "That is an unusual question." "Maybe." She considered it. "When we were children, yes. And now." A shadow crossed her expression. "Now is more complicated." Nathaniel waited. Eventually she sighed. "After my mother died, Victoria spent several years living here." Her gaze drifted toward the window. "We were nearly inseparable." "What changed?" Genevieve laughed softly. I wish I knew. The answer sounded honest. 1 year we were sharing secrets. Her smile faded. The next year everything felt different. Different how? Genevieve looked down at the documents. Competitive. The word seemed difficult for her to say. People compared us constantly. Who was prettier? Who was more charming? Who would marry first? She shook her head. The comparisons never stopped. Nathaniel felt a growing sense of understanding. And Victoria resented it. Maybe. Genevieve looked uncertain. Or maybe I imagined it. Nathaniel doubted that. Strongly. The following day confirmed his suspicions. Carter Estate hosted a small charity planning meeting attended by local families. Genevieve spent hours organizing donations and transportation logistics. Nearly every decision came from her. Yet when the meeting concluded, the guests directed their praise elsewhere, specifically toward Victoria. Wonderful organization, one woman remarked. Victoria smiled modestly. Everyone contributed. Another guest nodded. Still, your leadership was obvious. Nathaniel immediately looked toward Genevieve. She said nothing. Absolutely nothing. She simply continued collecting paperwork. The injustice annoyed him. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly woman approached Genevieve privately. Nathaniel happened to be close enough to overhear. You know they are praising the wrong person. Genevieve smiled politely. It does not matter. The woman patted her hand gently. It should. For a brief moment, emotion flashed across Genevieve's face. Sadness, weariness, acceptance. Then it vanished. Thank you, she said quietly. Later that evening, Nathaniel encountered Victoria alone on the terrace. Sunset painted the sky with gold and crimson. She stood overlooking the gardens. Elegant, composed, perfect. Alex Reed, she said as he approached. You seem to spend a remarkable amount of time around my cousin. Nathaniel remained cautious. We work together occasionally. Victoria smiled. Of course. Something about the smile felt dangerous. Genevieve has always attracted loyal people. She is easy to respect. Victoria's gaze shifted toward the distant fields. That is what everyone says. Silence followed. Then, surprisingly, she laughed. Not her usual polished laugh. A different one. Colder. More honest. Do you know what it is like growing up beside someone who effortlessly becomes everyone's favorite? Nathaniel said nothing. Victoria continued anyway. Genevieve never even tries. Her voice remained calm. Teachers adored her. Workers adored her. Tenants adored her. She looked toward him. Even now, for the first time, Nathaniel saw genuine emotion behind the flawless mask. Hurt, jealousy, years of accumulated resentment. Perhaps they have reasons, he said carefully. Victoria's smile returned immediately. The moment disappeared. Perhaps. Then she walked away. Nathaniel remained on the terrace long after she left. The conversation confirmed something important. Victoria's actions were not random cruelty. They came from years of bitterness, years of feeling overlooked. That realization did not excuse her behavior. It explained it. Unfortunately, explanations often made people more dangerous, not less. 2 days later, another development pushed the mystery forward. Genevieve found him near the stables shortly before dusk. Excitement brightened her face. I found something. Nathaniel immediately straightened. About the bridge? She nodded. A witness. Who? Former maintenance supervisor. Her eyes shone with cautious hope. He retired years ago and moved to a neighboring county. I found a forwarding address. Nathaniel felt anticipation build. Will you speak with him? Tomorrow. Then her expression darkened slightly. Assuming someone does not convince me otherwise. The remark lingered between them. Both knew exactly what she meant. Someone inside Carter Estate seemed determined to keep certain truths buried. And with every new clue Genevieve uncovered, the resistance became more obvious. As twilight settled across the estate, Nathaniel watched her clutch the folded address in her hand. Determined, brave, unwilling to abandon the search. He admired her for it. More than he should. More than was safe. Because somewhere between hidden records, summer storms, and long conversations beside stable doors, his feelings had become impossible to deny. He was no longer protecting an investigation. He was protecting Genevieve. And deep down, he was beginning to suspect that before this mystery finally ended, someone would force him to choose between the truth he had come to uncover and the secret identity he was desperately trying to keep hidden. The following morning began before sunrise. A thin layer of mist drifted across the fields surrounding Carter Estate. Dew covered the grass. The world appeared peaceful. Yet Nathaniel sensed the calm would not last. Genevieve stood near the carriage house holding a folded address and a leather satchel containing notes from her investigation. Determination radiated from her posture. She had spent years accepting uncertainty. Now she was finally moving toward answers. Nathaniel found himself admiring her even before she noticed his presence. "You are leaving early." Genevieve turned. The retired supervisor lives nearly 15 miles away. Long trip. Worth it if he remembers something useful. Her expression softened slightly. "I suppose you are heading to the stables." "Eventually," she smiled. "You always say that when you intend to involve yourself in someone else's business." Nathaniel almost laughed. The troubling part was that she was becoming remarkably good at reading him. Perhaps. Genevieve studied him for a moment. "You are curious. About the bridge? About everything." Nathaniel accepted the accusation without argument. "That too." Before either could continue, another voice interrupted. "Good morning." Charles approached from the manor entrance carrying riding gloves and a dark coat. His appearance immediately altered the atmosphere. Not negatively, simply noticeably. Genevieve's face brightened. Nathaniel hated that he noticed. "Charles, I hope I am not late." Genevieve shook her head. "Not at all." Nathaniel frowned slightly. "You are joining her?" Charles nodded. "Someone should ensure she does not spend 6 hours questioning strangers without remembering to eat." Genevieve rolled her eyes. "I eat. Occasionally." "That is an exaggeration." Charles smiled. "A small one." The exchange looked effortless. Comfortable. Familiar. Nathaniel felt a surprisingly unpleasant sensation settle in his chest. He recognized it immediately. Unfortunately, recognition did not make it disappear. The carriage departed minutes later. Nathaniel remained standing near the drive long after it vanished beyond the gates. Samuel appeared beside him carrying a feed bucket. "They seem happy." Nathaniel did not respond. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting." "What is?" "Nothing." "You say that often." "Because it annoys you." Nathaniel walked away before the conversation could continue. Unfortunately, distance offered little relief. Throughout the day, he found himself thinking about Genevieve, wondering whether the meeting was successful, wondering whether Charles remained at her side, wondering far too many things he had no right to wonder. By late afternoon, the carriage finally returned. Nathaniel happened to be repairing tack outside the stable when he heard approaching wheels. His attention shifted instantly. Genevieve climbed out first. Charles followed. One glance told Nathaniel something significant had happened. Excitement illuminated Genevieve's features. "You found something?" Nathaniel said before he could stop himself. Genevieve looked surprised. "How did you know?" "Your face." A smile spread across hers. The supervisor remembered the maintenance request. Nathaniel immediately stood. "And?" "He did not submit it." Her excitement faded into concern. "Someone else did." "Who?" Genevieve unfolded several papers. The original request came from a junior inspector assigned to the bridge project. She hesitated. The strange part is that he resigned only weeks after filing the report. Nathaniel felt anticipation build. Did anyone know where he went? No, Charles answered this time. The supervisor said the man disappeared shortly after the collapse. Silence followed. The information felt important. Dangerous even. Another missing piece. Another unanswered question. Genevieve lowered her voice slightly. And there is more. Nathaniel's attention sharpened. What? She handed him a copied note. The inspector claimed repair funds had been delayed repeatedly. Nathaniel stared at the page. Delayed by whom? That information was removed from the surviving records. The mystery deepened once again. Yet despite the troubling implications, Genevieve seemed energized. Hope had returned. For the first time in years, she was uncovering evidence rather than assumptions. As evening settled over Carter Estate, preparations for the upcoming Harvest Ball accelerated. The annual event attracted neighboring families, local officials, and prominent landowners from across the region. Servants polished silver. Florists arrived with wagon loads of flowers. Musicians confirmed schedules. The manor transformed daily. Nathaniel quickly learned that everyone viewed the ball as the social event of the season. Everyone except Genevieve. He found her reviewing bridge documents in the library while servants measured draperies nearby. Most women would be planning dresses. Genevieve glanced up. Most women are sensible. And you are not? Obviously not. Her smile appeared briefly. I am chasing 20-year-old paperwork. Nathaniel pulled out a chair. You found another clue. Maybe. She slid a document across the desk. Look at the dates. Nathaniel studied the page. Several maintenance approvals appeared routine. Then he noticed something unusual. A 6-week gap. Nothing was processed. Genevieve nodded. Exactly. During the period when repairs should have happened. Nathaniel looked at her. Someone intentionally stalled the project. That is my theory. Her expression darkened. The question is why. Before Nathaniel could respond, footsteps approached. Victoria entered the library carrying invitation lists. Her smile appeared flawless as always. There you are. Genevieve closed the documents immediately. Nathaniel noticed. So did Victoria. Still working? Victoria asked pleasantly. A little. You should take a break. Her gaze drifted toward the papers. The Harvest Ball is only 3 days away. Genevieve's expression became carefully neutral. I remember. Victoria laughed softly. Good. Then she turned toward Nathaniel. Alex, would you mind helping the staff move tables tomorrow? Of course. Wonderful. Her smile never faltered. Yet something about the interaction felt deliberate, calculated. After she left, Genevieve remained silent. Nathaniel waited. Eventually she sighed. She does that often. What? Appears whenever the investigation makes progress. Nathaniel leaned back slowly. You really believe it is connected? I do not know. Genevieve stared toward the doorway. But I am beginning to wonder. The words lingered heavily between them. The next day brought another development. Charles spent most of the afternoon assisting with ball preparations. Unlike many guests, he actually helped rather than simply offering opinions. Workers appreciated him immediately. So did Genevieve. Nathaniel noticed that too. During one particularly chaotic moment involving floral arrangements and seating assignments, Charles calmly solved a dispute that had consumed nearly an hour. Genevieve laughed afterward. You missed your calling. As what? Estate manager. Charles looked horrified. Absolutely not. Why? Too much paperwork. She laughed again. The sound reached Nathaniel from across the courtyard. Once more, that familiar jealousy surfaced. This time he could no longer pretend it was temporary. The realization arrived with startling clarity. He loved her. The truth settled over him quietly. No dramatic revelation. No sudden shock. Merely certainty. He loved her intelligence. Her resilience. Her kindness. He loved the way she listened when others spoke. The way she noticed details. The way she continued moving forward despite years of disappointment. Most of all, he loved the fact that she remained compassionate even after being repeatedly overlooked. Nathaniel stood motionless beside a wagon while the realization fully settled into place. He was in love with Genevieve Carter. The knowledge should have brought happiness. Instead, it carried a painful complication. Because Genevieve did not know who he truly was. That evening, while final preparations for the Harvest Ball continued throughout the manor, Genevieve made another discovery. Nathaniel found her in the archive room shortly before midnight. Excitement and disbelief competed across her face. "Look at this." She handed him a fragile document. He scanned the contents quickly, then read them again. "This is a payment authorization." "Yes. For bridge repairs." Genevieve nodded. "Approved 6 months before the collapse." Nathaniel looked up sharply. "The money existed." "Exactly." Her voice dropped. "The repairs were funded." Silence filled the room. The implication became obvious immediately. If the repairs had been funded but never completed, then someone had redirected the money. Someone with authority. Someone powerful. Genevieve stared at the document. "We are closer than ever." Nathaniel agreed. Yet another thought troubled him. Every answer seemed leading them toward Carter Estate itself. Toward people Genevieve trusted. Toward people she loved. As they left the archive room together, neither noticed the shadow briefly visible at the far end of the corridor. A figure who disappeared the moment footsteps approached. A figure who had seen enough to understand that Genevieve Carter was closer to the truth than she had ever been before. And with the harvest ball only days away, the carefully hidden secrets of Carter Estate were beginning to run out of places to hide. The night of the harvest ball arrived beneath a sky filled with stars. Lanterns illuminated the gardens of Carter Estate. Music drifted from the manor. Carriages lined the drive for nearly a quarter mile. Guests from across the county filled the estate with laughter, conversation, and expectation. It should have been a celebration. Instead, before the evening ended, it would become one of the most painful nights of Genevieve Carter's life. Nathaniel knew something was wrong the moment he saw her. She stood near the grand staircase greeting guests alongside Lord Carter and Victoria. Candlelight reflected from crystal chandeliers overhead. Elegant gowns swept across polished floors. Yet despite the beauty surrounding her, Genevieve looked oddly alone. Not unhappy, not nervous. Alone. People greeted her politely, then moved on. Conversations formed around her. Rarely with her. Nathaniel remained among the staff, observing from a distance. As Alex Reed, he had no place among the guests. Yet he found countless excuses to remain near the ballroom. Every instinct urged him to stay close. He did not trust the atmosphere. Too many smiles felt artificial. Too many glances lingered too long. Victoria, meanwhile, seemed to flourish. She moved effortlessly through the crowd. Guests gathered around her. Laughter followed her everywhere. By the time the first dances began, she had become the unofficial center of attention. Genevieve appeared not to notice. Nathaniel suspected she noticed everything. Charles arrived shortly after 8 o'clock. The moment he entered the ballroom, he crossed directly toward Genevieve. Her expression brightened. "You made it. I promised I would." Charles offered his arm. "May I have the first dance?" Genevieve laughed softly. "You planned that answer in advance." "Obviously." She accepted. Together they moved onto the dance floor. Nathaniel watched from across the room. The sight should have pleased him. Charles treated her well. Better than most people did. Yet jealousy remained an unpleasant companion. He forced himself to focus elsewhere. Unfortunately, the evening soon provided a far more serious concern. During a break between dances, Nathaniel noticed Victoria speaking quietly with a group of young aristocratic women near the refreshment tables. Their expressions shifted repeatedly toward Genevieve. Smiles appeared, then whispers, then more smiles. A familiar sense of unease settled over him. 20 minutes later, the whispers had spread. Nathaniel watched it happen. One conversation became two. Two became 5. Guests glanced toward Genevieve with increasing frequency. Some looked amused, others curious, a few openly judgmental. Whatever story was circulating, it was moving quickly. Charles appeared unaware. Genevieve seemed confused. Victoria looked perfectly relaxed. Nathaniel felt anger beginning to rise. Then he heard the first comment. "Apparently she spends quite a lot of time in the stables." A woman laughed behind a fan. "More than necessary, I am told." Another guest smiled knowingly. Perhaps horses are not the only reason. Quiet laughter followed. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. The implication was obvious. Cruel. Deliberate. The rumors continued spreading. I heard she disappears for hours. With one of the workers. How unusual. How embarrassing. Every statement remained carefully indirect. Nobody made direct accusations. Nobody needed to. The crowd supplied its own conclusions. Genevieve gradually became aware of the shifting atmosphere. Nathaniel saw it in her eyes. The confusion, then realization, then hurt. Yet she maintained her composure. As always, that somehow made everything worse. Near the center of the ballroom, a group of guests gathered around Victoria. Their conversation grew increasingly animated. Nathaniel moved closer. Not enough to attract attention. Close enough to listen. Surely the stories are exaggerated, one woman remarked. Victoria laughed lightly. I would never spread gossip. Of course not. Although Genevieve has always preferred unusual company. More laughter followed. Another guest raised an eyebrow. You mean stable hands? Victoria gave a helpless little shrug. I mean exactly what I said. The room erupted with amusement. Nathaniel clenched his hands. Across the ballroom, Genevieve had heard every word. So had Charles. His expression darkened immediately. He started forward. Genevieve touched his arm, stopping him. Do not. Her voice remained calm. Too calm. Charles looked furious. They are insulting you. I know. Then let me respond. Genevieve shook her head. Please. Nathaniel watched the exchange from a distance. His respect for Charles increased. His anger toward Victoria intensified. The situation deteriorated rapidly afterward. One of the older society women approached Genevieve directly. She smiled pleasantly. The smile never reached her eyes. My dear, I hope you will forgive an older woman's concern. Genevieve remained polite. Of course. Young ladies should be careful about appearances. Silence spread around them. Nearby conversations slowed. People listened. Genevieve understood immediately. So did everyone else. I am not sure I understand. The older woman tilted her head. Associating too closely with servants can create misunderstandings. The ballroom seemed to freeze. Charles stepped forward. Genevieve stopped him again. Nathaniel felt something dangerous building inside him. The woman continued. Society can be unkind. Genevieve stood perfectly still. Indeed, particularly when boundaries become blurred. A few guests laughed quietly. Others looked away. Lord Carter stood less than 20 feet away. He heard everything. He did nothing. Nathaniel's attention shifted toward him. Waiting. Hoping. Surely a father would intervene. Surely he would defend his daughter. Lord Carter remained silent. The disappointment on Genevieve's face lasted only a second. Yet Nathaniel saw it clearly. The realization hurt her more than the insults themselves. Her own father would not stand beside her. Victoria approached then, appearing concerned. What is happening? The performance would have been impressive if Nathaniel had not already seen the truth. The older woman smiled. Merely offering advice. Victoria sighed dramatically. People can be so cruel. The hypocrisy nearly made Nathaniel step forward despite the risk. Genevieve looked at her cousin for a long moment. Something changed in her expression. Not certainty. Suspicion. For the first time, real suspicion. Victoria saw it too. Their eyes locked briefly across the crowded ballroom. Then Victoria smiled again. Too quickly. Too perfectly. Genevieve noticed. Nathaniel noticed. The moment passed. Yet something important had happened. Another piece of the puzzle had shifted into place. Unfortunately, the humiliation was not finished. A young nobleman raised his glass nearby. Perhaps Miss Carter simply enjoys practical education. Laughter erupted. Very practical. More laughter followed. This time louder. Crueler. Genevieve's composure finally cracked. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Her chin lifted slightly. Her eyes glistened. Only someone watching carefully would notice. Nathaniel noticed. Charles noticed. Neither could do anything without worsening the situation. The cruelty of that reality felt unbearable. Genevieve set down her untouched drink. "Excuse me." Her voice remained steady. Somehow that made it more heartbreaking. She turned and walked toward the ballroom exit. Nobody stopped her. Not Lord Carter. Not Victoria. Not the guests enjoying the spectacle. Charles started after her. Nathaniel moved first. He slipped through a side corridor and reached the terrace before she emerged. Cool night air greeted her as she stepped outside. Music continued faintly behind the closed doors. For several seconds, she simply stood there staring into the darkness. Nathaniel remained near the shadows, unsure whether he should approach. Then Genevieve laughed once. A small broken sound he had never heard from her before. How foolish! The words were barely audible. She pressed one hand against the terrace railing. Nathaniel saw her shoulders rise with a slow breath. Then another, holding herself together. Alone. Again. "Genevieve." She turned immediately. Surprise crossed her face when she recognized him. "Alex." Her smile attempted to appear normal. Failed completely. "You should be inside." "So should you." Silence followed. The distance between them felt unusually fragile. Genevieve looked toward the stars. Perhaps they are right. Nathaniel's expression hardened. "No. You did not even ask what I meant. Because I know." She laughed softly. Confident. Certain. Genevieve looked down. "Maybe I make everything more difficult." "You make everything better." The answer emerged before he could stop it. Their eyes met. Something powerful passed between them. Dangerous. Honest. For one impossible moment, the world seemed to disappear. Then the ballroom doors opened behind them. Voices approached. The moment shattered. Genevieve stepped back first. Nathaniel hated the interruption. More than he should have. Charles emerged onto the terrace. Relief crossed his face when he found her. "There you are." Genevieve smiled weakly. "I needed air." Charles looked toward the ballroom. His jaw tightened. "You deserved better than that." Nathaniel silently agreed. Charles stepped closer. "Do not let them define you." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. Genevieve looked genuinely touched. Nathaniel found himself respecting him even more, which was remarkably inconvenient. A servant appeared moments later carrying a tray of empty glasses. The interruption ended the conversation. Yet as the evening continued and guests slowly returned to dancing, Nathaniel could not forget what he had witnessed. The humiliation, the silence from Lord Carter, the suspicion in Genevieve's eyes when she looked at Victoria. Most importantly, he could not forget the pain she had tried so hard to hide. Because for the first time since arriving at Carter Estate, Genevieve Carter was beginning to understand that the people hurting her might not be strangers at all. They might be the very people she had trusted for years. And somewhere inside the ballroom, behind perfect smiles and polished manners, someone was becoming increasingly nervous that she was finally starting to see the truth. The morning after the harvest ball felt strangely quiet. Sunlight spilled across Carter Estate. Workers resumed their routines. Carriages departed. Guests exchanged polite farewells. Outwardly, life appeared unchanged. Yet beneath the calm surface, something fundamental had shifted. Genevieve no longer looked merely hurt. She looked determined. Nathaniel noticed it immediately. He found her shortly after breakfast standing beside the old stone wall overlooking the eastern fields. A notebook rested beneath her arm. Several folded documents occupied one hand. Her expression held the same focus he had seen during the storm, during long nights in the archives, and during every difficult challenge she had ever faced. Pain had not stopped her. It had sharpened her. "You should be resting," Nathaniel said as he approached. Genevieve glanced over. "After last night?" "Especially after last night." A faint smile touched her lips. "I spent years worrying about what people thought of me." Her gaze drifted toward the fields. "I am beginning to think I wasted a great deal of energy." Nathaniel studied her carefully. "You are not letting them win." "No," the answer came immediately. "I am tired of letting other people define my story." Something in her voice made him proud. More proud than a man in his position should probably feel. Genevieve unfolded one of the documents. Besides, I have more important problems. Nathaniel nodded toward the papers. The bridge. The bridge. She exhaled slowly. And whoever kept the truth hidden. Before he could respond, Charles approached from the manor. As always, his presence brightened Genevieve's mood. The realization still irritated Nathaniel. It simply irritated him less now because he had accepted the truth. Charles was not the enemy. The enemy was whatever secret had been poisoning Carter estate for years. I found something, Charles announced. Genevieve immediately straightened. What? Charles handed her a folded sheet. I spent part of the morning reviewing county expenditure records. Nathaniel blinked. You reviewed county records? Charles smiled. I have been spending time with Genevieve. Curiosity is contagious. Genevieve laughed softly. The sound eased some of the tension lingering from the previous night. Charles pointed toward the document. The repair funds for the bridge passed through 3 separate authorizations before disappearing. Nathaniel's attention sharpened instantly. 3. Yes. Charles nodded. And 1 approval signature appears on every transfer. Genevieve scanned the page quickly. Her expression changed. Excitement mixed with concern. This name again. Nathaniel moved closer. Who? Genevieve looked up. Edgar Wilkes. The name meant nothing to Nathaniel. Charles noticed his confusion. Assistant estate accountant 20 years ago. Former employee? Nathaniel asked. Former employee who vanished shortly after the bridge collapse, Genevieve replied. Silence settled over the group. Another missing person. Another suspicious disappearance. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Later that afternoon, Genevieve proposed something unexpected. We need to stop relying entirely on estate records. Nathaniel looked up from the ledger he had been studying. What do you suggest? Outside sources. Her eyes brightened. People who had no reason to alter documents. Charles immediately understood. Contractors. Exactly. Genevieve nodded. If repair work was approved, someone must have been hired. Nathaniel felt anticipation growing. And if they were hired, they left records. Invoices. Receipts. Correspondence. Charles smiled. Now that sounds promising. The investigation accelerated over the following 3 days. For the first time, progress came from multiple directions. Genevieve contacted former contractors. Charles reviewed county archives. Nathaniel quietly used resources available through his true identity without revealing the source. Letters arrived. Names surfaced. Financial trails emerged. Piece by piece, the truth began revealing itself. One evening, shortly before sunset, Genevieve burst into the stable office carrying several documents. Her excitement was unmistakable. We found him. Nathaniel immediately stood. Wilkes. She nodded. Or at least what happened to him. Charles entered moments later carrying additional records. He never disappeared voluntarily. Nathaniel frowned. Explain. Genevieve spread documents across the desk. 6 weeks after submitting concerns about the bridge repairs, Wilkes resigned. That part we knew. Yes. Her finger moved to another page. But according to county tax records, he never accepted another accounting position. Nathaniel studied the information. What did he do instead? Genevieve's expression darkened. Nothing. For almost a year. Silence followed. Charles picked up the explanation. Then he left the county entirely. Without explanation. Nathaniel looked between them. That seems unusual. Very. Genevieve nodded. Especially because multiple witnesses described him as ambitious. She folded her arms. People planning successful careers do not simply vanish after exposing financial misconduct. The conclusion hung heavily in the room. Someone had silenced him. Perhaps not through threats. Perhaps not through force. Yet something had happened. Something significant enough to make him disappear from the story. The breakthrough arrived the following afternoon. Nathaniel would remember the moment for the rest of his life. Genevieve sat in the archive room reviewing contractor invoices when she suddenly froze. Charles happened to be searching nearby shelves. Nathaniel was organizing older ledgers. None of them spoke for several seconds. Then Genevieve whispered a single word. No. Nathaniel looked up immediately. What happened? Her eyes remained fixed on the page before her. This cannot be right. Charles crossed the room first. Genevieve. She slowly handed him the document. Nathaniel moved closer. Together they examined the faded invoice. The answer revealed itself almost instantly. Repair materials for the bridge had been purchased, delivered, paid for. The shipment records existed. The invoices existed. The signatures existed. Yet the materials had never reached the bridge project. They went somewhere else, Charles said quietly. Genevieve nodded. Yes. Nathaniel felt a chill. Can you trace where? Genevieve pointed toward a secondary entry. A private construction account. Charles frowned. For what project? Genevieve turned the page. Her face went pale. The manor expansion. Silence filled the archive room. Nathaniel read the words twice. Then a third time. The implications became unavoidable. Funds approved to repair the dangerous bridge had been diverted elsewhere. Not lost. Not misplaced. Diverted. Deliberately. The realization changed everything. Genevieve sat down slowly. The repairs could have happened. No one answered. She stared at the records. The collapse did not happen because there was no money. Charles lowered himself into a nearby chair. No. Genevieve's voice trembled slightly. The money existed. Nathaniel watched the truth settle across her face. 20 years of uncertainty. 20 years of questions. 20 years of wondering whether the tragedy had simply been an unfortunate accident. It had not. The bridge remained dangerous because someone chose another priority. Someone signed those approvals. Someone redirected those funds. Someone made a decision. A terrible silence followed. Then Genevieve spoke again. We need the authorization signatures. Nathaniel nodded immediately. The missing names. Exactly. Her eyes hardened. Without them, we have suspicion. She looked up. With them, we have proof. The determination in her expression reminded him of the woman he first met in the stables. The woman who refused to abandon responsibilities no matter how difficult they became. Yet now something else existed beneath that determination. Anger. Not reckless anger. Righteous anger. The kind born from finally understanding an old wound. As evening settled over Carter Estate, Genevieve gathered the documents carefully. Charles offered to continue reviewing county records. Nathaniel volunteered to search older estate ledgers. The investigation had reached a turning point. For the first time, they were no longer asking whether wrongdoing occurred. They were asking who committed it. Much later, after darkness covered the estate, Nathaniel remained alone in the archive room. Stacks of records surrounded him. Candlelight flickered across yellowed pages. Most documents proved useless. Then, shortly before midnight, he found something. A ledger entry hidden among routine expenditures. Small, easy to overlook, yet devastating. Nathaniel stared at the notation for several seconds. The handwriting matched multiple bridge records. More importantly, the authorization initials matched another document already linked to the diverted funds. He closed the ledger slowly. His pulse quickened. Because for the first time since arriving at Carter Estate, he believed he knew where the investigation would eventually lead. And if he was correct, the truth would not merely expose corruption. It would shatter Genevieve's understanding of her family forever. Nathaniel did not sleep that night. The ledger remained open on the archive table long after midnight. Candlelight flickered across faded entries. The evidence itself was not enough to prove guilt. Not yet. But it pointed toward a possibility he had been dreading for weeks. The missing authorization initials matched documents connected to the diverted repair funds. More importantly, they connected to a name that appeared repeatedly throughout estate records from 20 years earlier. A name Genevieve trusted. A name that would break her heart if his suspicions proved correct. Dawn arrived slowly. By the time sunlight filtered through the archive windows, Nathaniel had made a decision. He would not reveal anything until he possessed undeniable proof. Genevieve deserved certainty. Not speculation. Not assumptions. Certainty. Unfortunately, events began moving faster than any of them anticipated. Later that morning, Genevieve summoned Nathaniel and Charles to the library. The moment he entered, he knew something significant had happened. Several documents covered the table. Genevieve stood beside them with an expression he had never seen before. Shock mixed with determination. Someone entered the archives last night. Charles immediately looked up. What? Genevieve pointed toward an empty space on the table. 3 files are missing. Nathaniel felt his stomach tighten. Which files? Bridge authorizations. Silence settled heavily across the room. Charles frowned. Only bridge records? Only bridge records. Genevieve folded her arms. Nothing else was touched. The meaning became obvious immediately. Someone knew the investigation was approaching the truth. Someone was becoming desperate. Nathaniel glanced toward the windows. Who has access? Officially. Genevieve sighed. Several senior staff members. My father. Victoria. Myself. Charles exchanged a look with Nathaniel. Neither spoke. The list was uncomfortable. Genevieve noticed. You are both thinking the same thing. What? Charles asked carefully. That whoever removed those files knew exactly what they were looking for. Nathaniel could not disagree. The theft eliminated any remaining doubt. The corruption surrounding the bridge was not ancient history. Someone was still protecting it. That afternoon, Genevieve made another decision. One that surprised everyone. I want to speak with my father. Charles looked uncertain. Directly? Yes. Her voice remained calm. I have spent too much time avoiding difficult conversations. Nathaniel studied her face. She looked nervous despite her composure. Understandably so. Lord Carter had disappointed her repeatedly. Yet part of her still hoped for answers. Perhaps even support. The meeting took place in Lord Carter's private study. Nathaniel remained outside. So did Charles. Neither had been invited. The closed door separated them from the conversation. Yet even from the hallway, Nathaniel sensed the tension. Nearly 40 minutes passed before the door finally opened. Genevieve emerged first. Her face was pale. Lord Carter remained inside. Neither looked at the other. Nathaniel immediately stepped forward. Genevieve. She did not answer right away. Her eyes glistened slightly. Not with tears. With disappointment. The kind that cuts deeper. What happened? Charles asked gently. Genevieve laughed once. The sound contained no humor. Apparently I ask too many questions. Silence followed. That is what he said? Nathaniel asked. She nodded. According to my father, some matters should remain in the past. The words struck Nathaniel like a warning bell. And the bridge? Genevieve stared toward the far end of the corridor. He refused to discuss it. Why? Charles asked. Genevieve looked down. Because reopening old wounds helps no one. The statement hung heavily in the air. Nathaniel felt anger rising. Not because Lord Carter avoided the conversation. Because Genevieve looked genuinely hurt. She had approached him seeking truth. Perhaps even understanding. Instead, she received dismissal. Again. Later that evening, Genevieve wandered alone through the gardens. Nathaniel found her near the fountain where they had spoken weeks earlier. Summer was beginning to surrender to early autumn. Leaves drifted across stone pathways. The air carried a slight chill. You should not be alone. Genevieve smiled faintly. Everyone keeps saying that. Nathaniel sat beside her. For several moments, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Familiar. Finally, Genevieve sighed. Do you ever realize that someone has disappointed you for so long that it stops feeling surprising? Nathaniel looked toward the fountain. Yes. She nodded slowly. I think that happened today. The sadness in her voice felt heavier than any tears could have been. Nathaniel wanted to tell her the truth. Not about the bridge. About himself. About everything. Instead, he remained silent. Because every instinct warned him the timing was wrong. Genevieve deserved one betrayal less. Not one more. "You deserve better," he said quietly. She laughed softly. Charles said the same thing. The mention of Charles brought an uncomfortable sensation. Genevieve noticed immediately. To Nathaniel's horror, she smiled. A genuine smile. "There it is." "What?" "That expression." "I have no idea what you mean." "Of course you do." Amusement sparkled briefly in her eyes. "You do not like Charles very much." Nathaniel looked away. "That is not true." "Alex." "Fine." He exhaled slowly. "Perhaps slightly." Genevieve's smile widened. "Why?" Unfortunately, he knew exactly why. "No reason." "That is clearly not true." Nathaniel stood before the conversation became even more dangerous. Genevieve laughed quietly as he walked away. The sound followed him across the garden. For the first time in days, she sounded genuinely happy. The following morning brought another breakthrough. Charles arrived carrying a sealed envelope obtained from county records. Excitement radiated from him. "We found the final authorization chain." Genevieve immediately abandoned her breakfast. "Show me." Nathaniel joined them moments later. Together they spread the documents across the dining room table. Several names appeared. Most meant little. Then Genevieve froze. Complete silence followed. Charles noticed first. "What is it?" Genevieve stared at the page. Her face drained of color. "This signature." Nathaniel stepped closer. The name hit him immediately. Not because it surprised him. Because it confirmed his fears. Edward Sinclair. Victoria's late father. Genevieve's uncle. The man who had overseen estate financial operations during the period leading up to the bridge collapse. Charles slowly lowered himself into a chair. "Good Lord." Genevieve remained motionless. "No," the word emerged almost as a whisper. Nathaniel wished he could disagree. He could not. Multiple authorizations carried the same signature. Multiple fund transfers connected directly to Sinclair's office. The evidence was becoming overwhelming. "There must be another explanation," Genevieve said quietly. Yet even she sounded unconvinced. Charles looked at the documents. "Maybe." Nathaniel said nothing. Genevieve suddenly stood. "I need air." She left the room before either man could stop her. Hours later, the situation grew even worse. Because another letter arrived. This one from a retired solicitor who had once worked with estate finances. The contents changed everything. According to his testimony, Edward Sinclair had not acted alone. Several financial decisions required approval from the estate owner. Lord Carter himself. Silence filled the library after Genevieve finished reading the letter. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The implications were devastating. Genevieve sat staring at the page. Her hands trembled slightly. Nathaniel had never seen her look so lost. "My father knew." The words barely rose above a whisper. Charles leaned forward. "Genevieve." She shook her head slowly. "He knew." Years of confusion suddenly rearranged themselves into a painful new shape. The silence. The avoidance. The refusal to discuss the bridge. The missing records. The warnings to leave the past alone. Every piece fit. Nathaniel wanted to comfort her. Yet no words seemed sufficient. Because this was no longer merely an investigation. It was the collapse of trust. The collapse of family. The collapse of the story Genevieve had believed about her own life. As twilight settled over Carter Estate, she remained seated beside the library window staring toward the distant horizon. Charles eventually left to gather additional documentation. Nathaniel stayed. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Genevieve looked toward him. "What happens when the people you trust become strangers?" The question carried years of pain. Nathaniel answered honestly. "You find out who truly stands beside you." Their eyes met. Something shifted between them. Not romance. Not yet. Something deeper. Recognition. Trust. The beginning of a truth neither could ignore much longer. Yet even as that realization settled between them, another secret remained hidden. One final secret capable of changing everything. Because while Genevieve was discovering the truth about her family, she still did not know the truth about Alex Reed. And very soon, Nathaniel would no longer have the luxury of keeping that secret. The following day arrived beneath heavy gray clouds. Autumn winds swept across Carter Estate. Leaves drifted through the gardens and gathered along stone pathways. The changing seasons seemed fitting. Everything around Genevieve was changing as well. Some changes brought truth. Others brought heartbreak. By mid-morning, word had spread quietly through the household that Genevieve had requested a formal review of historical estate finances. Nobody openly discussed it, yet servants whispered. Staff exchanged cautious glances. Tension lingered beneath every interaction. Nathaniel noticed all of it. More importantly, he noticed Genevieve. She moved through the day with remarkable composure. She attended meetings, reviewed correspondence, spoke politely with tenants. Outwardly, she remained unchanged. Yet he could see the cost. Every smile required effort. Every conversation seemed to drain a little more energy from her. Years of trust were unraveling. No investigation could prepare someone for that. Shortly after noon, Charles arrived carrying additional records from the county archives. Genevieve met him in the library. Nathaniel joined them minutes later. The atmosphere felt unusually serious. Charles placed a leather folder on the table. "I found the final witness statement." Genevieve immediately looked up. "From whom?" "The retired solicitor." Charles opened the folder carefully. "A longer version of the letter we received yesterday." Nathaniel felt anticipation build. If the statement confirmed earlier evidence, the truth would become impossible to deny. Genevieve began reading. The room remained silent except for the rustle of paper. As the minutes passed, her expression grew increasingly pale. Eventually she lowered the document. "It is all here." Charles leaned forward. "Everything." She nodded slowly. "The repair requests. The delayed approvals. The diverted funds." Her voice weakened. "And the meetings." Nathaniel frowned. "Meetings?" Genevieve handed him the statement. He scanned several paragraphs quickly, then stopped. The solicitor described repeated discussions between Edward Sinclair and Lord Carter regarding estate expenditures. Bridge repairs had been postponed deliberately. Manor improvements had been prioritized instead. Not because funds were unavailable, because appearances mattered more. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. The truth felt worse than he imagined. Not criminal, not monstrous, human, selfish, careless. The kind of decision people justify every day, until consequences arrive. Genevieve stared toward the window. People died because they wanted a larger ballroom. Nobody answered. There was nothing to say. A long silence followed. Finally Charles spoke. "Genevieve." She looked at him. "This was not your fault." The statement struck something deep inside her. Nathaniel saw it immediately. For years she had carried questions, doubts, guilt she never deserved. Now the truth stood before her. Painful, unavoidable, yet liberating in its own way. The tragedy had not happened because someone failed. It happened because someone chose convenience over responsibility. That realization changed everything. The confrontation occurred later that afternoon. Genevieve requested another meeting with Lord Carter. This time she carried evidence. Witness statements, financial records, authorization documents, facts. Nathaniel and Charles waited outside the study once again. Neither spoke much. The atmosphere felt heavy. Nearly an hour passed. Then raised voices emerged from behind the closed door. Not shouting. Something worse. Genuine emotion. Genevieve rarely lost her composure. Hearing her voice crack with disappointment unsettled Nathaniel more than any argument could have. Minutes later, silence returned. Then the door opened. Genevieve stepped into the hallway. Lord Carter remained inside. His face looked older than Nathaniel had ever seen it. Defeated, exhausted, Genevieve walked past both men without speaking. Nathaniel immediately followed. He found her in the conservatory surrounded by autumn flowers and filtered sunlight. She stood beside a fountain staring into the water. "Genevieve." She laughed softly. The sound carried no joy. He admitted it. Nathaniel remained still. "Everything. Enough." Her eyes filled with tears she refused to release. They knew repairs were necessary. She swallowed hard. "They delayed them." The words seemed to physically hurt. "My father said they believed there was still time." Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. The excuse felt tragically familiar. "There is always time." Genevieve smiled bitterly. "Until there is not." Silence settled between them. Then something unexpected happened. Genevieve finally allowed the pain to surface. Not dramatically, not loudly, simply honestly. "I spent years wondering whether my mother could have been saved." Her voice trembled. "Years." Nathaniel felt his chest tighten. "Genevieve." She shook her head. "Do you know what hurts most?" He remained silent. "He never told me." A tear finally escaped despite her efforts. "He let me carry that uncertainty alone." The confession shattered something inside Nathaniel. More than the corruption. More than the deception. This was the real wound. Not money. Not records. Trust. A daughter abandoned emotionally by the people who should have protected her. Without thinking, Nathaniel stepped closer. "Look at me." Genevieve hesitated, then obeyed. "None of this reflects your worth." His voice remained steady. "Not their choices. Not their failures." Her eyes searched his. "You believe that?" "Absolutely." For a long moment, neither moved. The space between them seemed to disappear. Every conversation, every shared secret, every moment from the past several weeks gathered quietly around them. Genevieve looked at him differently now. Not as a friend. Not merely as an ally. Something deeper. Something neither could ignore much longer. Then footsteps interrupted the moment. Charles entered the conservatory. Concern immediately crossed his face. "Are you all right?" Genevieve stepped back slightly. The fragile intimacy vanished. Nathaniel hated the interruption and immediately felt guilty for it. Charles deserved better than becoming the target of silent resentment. "I will be," Genevieve answered. Charles nodded gently. "Good." He hesitated. "Because there is something else you need to know." Genevieve frowned. "What happened?" Charles held up a folded letter. "This arrived from London." Nathaniel's stomach tightened instantly. Charles continued. "It concerns the Duke of Ashcroft." Genevieve looked confused. "The Duke?" Charles nodded. "Apparently he has been conducting a private investigation into the bridge collapse." Nathaniel felt every muscle in his body go still. "Interesting," Genevieve said quietly. "There is more." Charles unfolded the letter. "According to this, he traveled to Carter Estate several months ago." Silence filled the conservatory. Nathaniel could practically hear his own heartbeat. Genevieve's expression sharpened. "Several months ago?" "Yes." Charles looked down at the page. "The strange part is that nobody knows where he went afterward." Genevieve slowly turned toward Nathaniel. Not because she suspected anything. Not yet. Simply because he happened to be standing nearby. Yet the timing felt almost unbearable. Nathaniel maintained a neutral expression through sheer force of will. Charles continued reading. "The Duke traveled under an assumed identity." Genevieve blinked. "Why?" "No explanation." Charles folded the letter. "Only speculation." Silence followed. Long, dangerous silence. Genevieve looked thoughtful. Nathaniel felt trapped between relief and dread. Because sooner or later the truth would emerge. He knew it. The question was no longer whether his secret would be revealed. The question was when. That evening, after Charles departed, Nathaniel wandered alone toward the stables. The estate grounds lay quiet beneath gathering darkness. Wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a horse shifted inside its stall. For weeks he had delayed the inevitable. For weeks he had convinced himself there would be a better time, a better moment, a better circumstance. Now those excuses were disappearing. Because Genevieve deserved honesty. She deserved truth from at least one person in her life. As he stood beneath the darkening sky, another realization settled heavily upon him. Revealing his identity might cost him everything. Her trust, her friendship, any possibility of something more. Yet remaining silent would cost even more. And somewhere inside the manor, entirely unaware of the decision forming in his mind, Genevieve Carter was only days away from discovering that the stable hand she trusted most had never truly been a stable hand at all. Nathaniel chose the following afternoon. Not because it was convenient, not because he felt prepared, because delaying the truth had become impossible. Autumn sunlight filtered through thinning leaves as he crossed the estate grounds toward the western gardens. He knew exactly where he would find Genevieve. Over the past months, certain places had become hers. The library when she needed answers. The stables when she needed quiet. The western garden when she needed space to think. She stood there now beside a stone bench overlooking the distant fields. Wind stirred loose strands of golden hair. A notebook rested in her lap, though she was clearly not reading it. Her thoughts seemed far away. Nathaniel stopped several feet from her. For a moment he simply watched, trying to memorize the woman who had changed his life without ever intending to. "You found me." Genevieve looked up and smiled faintly. "You always seem to." The answer made his chest tighten. "May I sit?" "Of course." He lowered himself onto the bench beside her. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence. Familiar silence. Yet beneath it, tension waited. Genevieve sensed it almost immediately. Something is wrong. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. Not wrong. Difficult. Her expression softened. That sounds worse. He almost laughed. Possibly. The wind rustled through nearby trees. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary moments. Nathaniel wished desperately that this could remain one. "Genevieve." She turned toward him fully. "What is it?" He held her gaze. "There is something I should have told you a long time ago." Confusion appeared first, then concern. "You are worrying me." "I know." Another silence followed. Then Nathaniel did the one thing he could no longer avoid. "My name is not Alex Reed." The world seemed to stop. Genevieve stared at him, not understanding at first, then understanding too much. "What?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "My name is Nathaniel Ashcroft." No sound came from her. "I am the Duke of Ashcroft." Complete silence followed. The wind continued moving through the trees. Birds continued singing. Yet Genevieve looked as though the entire world had shifted beneath her feet. "No," the word emerged automatically. "Genevieve." "No," she stood abruptly. The notebook slipped from her lap onto the bench. "You are joking." Nathaniel remained seated. "I wish I were." Her face drained of color. "The Duke?" "Yes." "The Duke who has been investigating the bridge collapse?" "Yes." She stared at him as though seeing a stranger. "You came here under a false name." "Yes." "You lied to me." The statement hurt because it was true. "At the beginning." Her eyes flashed. "At the beginning? I never intended for it to continue this long." "That is not an answer." Pain replaced the shock. Real pain. Nathaniel had expected anger. Somehow the hurt was worse. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why would you do that?" Nathaniel rose slowly. "Because I did not trust what I would find." Genevieve laughed once. A broken sound. "So you pretended to be a stable hand." "I needed the truth." "And apparently the truth required deceiving everyone around you." He accepted the accusation without defense. She deserved that much. "You have every right to be angry." "Angry?" Genevieve stared at him. "Do you know what the last few weeks have been for me?" Her voice trembled. "I discovered my father lied to me. My family lied to me. People I trusted lied to me." She shook her head slowly. "And now you." Nathaniel felt every word. Because each one was deserved. "I am sorry." "Do not." Tears gathered in her eyes. "Do not apologize unless you understand what you have done." Silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. Genevieve looked away first. Not because she wanted distance, because she was hurt, deeply hurt. Nathaniel recognized the difference immediately. Did any of it matter? She asked quietly. What? The conversations. Her voice softened. The friendship. The trust. Nathaniel answered instantly. Every moment mattered. She looked at him again, searching. How do I know that? Because it changed me. The answer came without hesitation. Genevieve's expression faltered. You expect me to believe that? Yes. Why? Nathaniel stepped closer. Because I came here expecting to judge you. Her eyes widened slightly. And I was wrong. Silence settled between them. I thought I would find someone irresponsible. Someone spoiled. Someone indifferent. His voice remained steady. Instead, I found the strongest woman I have ever known. Genevieve looked away again. Tears escaped despite her efforts. Stop. Why? Because I want to be angry. The confession nearly broke his heart. Nathaniel understood then. She was not struggling with whether he had betrayed her. She already knew he had. She was struggling because despite that betrayal, she still cared. Several moments passed before she finally spoke again. How long? Since the first day. Her eyes closed briefly. The stables. Yes. The horse. Yes. A disbelieving laugh escaped her. I ordered a duke to saddle my horse. Nathaniel smiled despite everything. You did. And you did it. I did. For the first time since the conversation began, a small smile touched her face. It vanished quickly. Yet it existed. Hope stirred inside him. Then another voice interrupted. Genevieve. Both turned. Victoria stood several yards away. Her expression revealed immediate curiosity. Then surprise. Then caution. I did not realize you were occupied. Genevieve wiped quickly at her eyes. What do you need? Victoria hesitated. There is a situation in the drawing room. Nathaniel immediately noticed something unusual. Victoria looked nervous. Truly nervous. Not jealous. Not irritated. Nervous. Genevieve noticed it too. What happened? Victoria glanced toward Nathaniel briefly. Someone arrived from London. Silence followed. Who? Genevieve asked. Victoria swallowed. A solicitor. Nathaniel felt his pulse quicken. The timing could not be accidental. What does he want? Victoria looked uncomfortable. He says he has documents regarding my father. Every trace of emotion vanished from Genevieve's face. The bridge investigation instantly reclaimed priority. I will be there shortly. Victoria nodded and retreated toward the manor. The moment she disappeared, silence returned. Yet everything had changed. Genevieve looked toward the house, then toward Nathaniel. I do not know what happens next. The honesty in her voice felt fragile. Nathaniel answered equally honestly. Neither do I. She studied him for several seconds. I am still angry. I know. Very angry. I know. Another pause followed. Then Genevieve sighed. Good. Nathaniel blinked. Good. Because if I was not angry, it would mean I did not care. The words landed between them with quiet force. Neither moved. Neither looked away. For the first time, the truth existed openly between them. Painful. Complicated. Yet honest. Then Genevieve picked up her notebook. Come with me. Nathaniel stared. Where? The drawing room. She began walking toward the manor. You helped uncover this mess. A small smile appeared despite everything. You are helping finish it. Nathaniel followed her across the gardens as autumn sunlight stretched long shadows over the estate. Ahead waited new evidence. New revelations. Perhaps even final answers. Yet one realization remained stronger than all the others. Genevieve Carter now knew exactly who he was. And despite the hurt, despite the anger, despite every reason to walk away, she had not asked him to leave. The drawing room felt unusually crowded when Genevieve and Nathaniel arrived. Lord Carter stood near the fireplace. Charles occupied a chair beside the windows. Victoria remained near the far wall with her hands clasped tightly together. The London solicitor stood at the center of the room holding a weathered leather case. Every face reflected tension. Every person understood that whatever happened next would matter. Genevieve entered first. Nathaniel followed several steps behind. For the first time since revealing his identity, he stood openly beside her. No disguise remained between them. No secrets. Only consequences. The solicitor bowed politely. "Miss Carter." Genevieve nodded. "You requested this meeting." "Yes." He opened the leather case carefully. "I recently acquired documents from the estate of Edward Sinclair." Silence settled across the room. Victoria visibly stiffened. The solicitor continued. Several personal letters were discovered among his effects. He removed a bundle of papers tied with faded ribbon. "Most are unimportant." His gaze moved toward Genevieve. "A few are not." Lord Carter closed his eyes briefly. Nathaniel noticed. So did Genevieve. The solicitor selected one letter and unfolded it. This correspondence was written approximately 6 months before the bridge collapse. The room remained perfectly still. Then he began reading. Every sentence drove the truth deeper. Edward Sinclair openly discussed delaying repairs. He complained about costs. He argued that estate improvements would produce greater social benefits. More importantly, the letter referenced multiple discussions with Lord Carter regarding those decisions. When the reading ended, silence followed. Heavy. Absolute. Genevieve did not look at her father immediately. She looked at Victoria. "Did you know?" Victoria's face paled. "No," the answer came instantly. "I swear I did not." For the first time since Nathaniel met her, Victoria appeared completely stripped of her usual confidence. "I knew my father handled estate finances." Her voice shook. "I never knew this." Genevieve studied her carefully, searching for deception, finding none. Eventually she nodded once. Victoria's shoulders sagged with visible relief. Then Genevieve turned toward Lord Carter. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Is it true?" Lord Carter stared into the fireplace for several seconds before answering. "Yes." The single word changed everything. No excuses, no denial, just truth. Genevieve closed her eyes. Nathaniel moved instinctively closer, not touching her, simply present. Lord Carter looked older than ever. "At first, we believed repairs could wait." His voice sounded tired. "Then costs increased." He swallowed hard. "Then other projects became priorities. People died." Genevieve's words emerged quietly, yet they struck harder than any accusation. Lord Carter nodded. "Yes." No one spoke. The weight of that admission filled the room. Finally Lord Carter looked directly at his daughter. "I was wrong." Genevieve's expression did not change. "You were." "I know." Pain crossed his face. Genuine pain. "And I have known for 20 years. The confession stunned everyone. Even Nathaniel. Lord Carter sank slowly into a chair. Not a single day passed without regret. Tears appeared in his eyes. Not one. Genevieve stood motionless. Years of anger. Years of confusion. Years of disappointment. All gathered in that moment. "Then why did you never tell me?" Her voice broke. Finally. For the first time since this journey began. "Why did you let me wonder?" Lord Carter looked shattered. "Because every year that passed made the truth harder to face." Genevieve laughed softly through tears. "So you chose silence?" "Yes." "And left me alone with the consequences." Lord Carter lowered his head. "Yes." No defense remained. No justification. Only failure. Human failure. The room stayed silent for a long time. Then something unexpected happened. Victoria stepped forward. Tears filled her eyes as well. "Genevieve." Her voice trembled. "There is something I need to say." Everyone turned toward her. Victoria looked directly at her cousin. "I spent years resenting you." The admission shocked no one more than Victoria herself. "People admired you, trusted you, needed you." Her voice cracked. "And I hated it." Genevieve stared in silence. Victoria continued. "The rumors at the harvest ball." She swallowed hard. "That was me." Charles exhaled sharply. Nathaniel felt anger rise instantly. Yet Victoria continued before anyone could interrupt. I told myself they were harmless. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I told myself you would recover. She shook her head. But I knew what I was doing. The confession echoed through the room. Genevieve looked genuinely hurt, perhaps even more than before. Victoria noticed. I am sorry. Truly. Not because I was caught. Her voice weakened. Because you deserved better. Silence followed. Then Genevieve surprised everyone. Yes. Victoria blinked. What? I deserved better. The statement carried no cruelty, only truth. And so did you. Victoria stared at her, confused. Genevieve stepped closer. People compared us our entire lives. Tears glistened in her eyes. Neither of us deserved that. Victoria covered her mouth. Emotion overwhelmed her completely. Years of jealousy suddenly looked smaller, sadder, more unnecessary. The room remained quiet as the two women faced each other. Finally Victoria whispered, Can you forgive me? Genevieve hesitated. The pause felt honest. Real forgiveness rarely arrives instantly. Then she nodded once. Eventually, Victoria laughed through tears. Fair enough. The tension in the room eased for the first time all day. Not because everything was fixed, because truth had finally arrived. Over the following weeks, the consequences spread throughout the county. Official records were corrected. Historical findings were released publicly. Memorial funds were established in honor of those lost during the bridge collapse. Lord Carter accepted responsibility. Not because anyone forced him, because he finally understood that honesty mattered more than reputation. Public reaction proved surprisingly compassionate. People respected accountability. They respected truth. Most of all, they respected Genevieve. Newspapers praised her persistence. Community leaders praised her courage. Former critics suddenly discovered admiration they had somehow overlooked for years. Nathaniel found the irony amusing. Genevieve did not. I am exactly the same person, she remarked one afternoon. You are. Yet suddenly everyone notices. Nathaniel smiled. Their failure, not yours. Weeks later, the first snow of winter dusted the estate grounds. White covered the fields. Chimneys released thin trails of smoke into the cold air. Carter Estate felt peaceful again. Not perfect, peaceful. Genevieve stood near the stables watching snowflakes drift through the afternoon light. Nathaniel approached quietly, this time dressed as himself. No disguise, no false name, no secrets. She noticed him immediately. You still walk too quietly. Years of practice. She smiled. A real smile. One he no longer had to earn. Your Grace. Nathaniel groaned. Please stop. Why? Amusement sparkled in her eyes. It is technically correct. You are enjoying this. A little. He shook his head. Terrible woman. Terrible Duke. The easy banter felt familiar now. Comfortable. Yet something important remained unspoken. Both knew it. Eventually Genevieve looked toward the snowy fields. Do you regret coming here? Nathaniel answered instantly. Not for a second. She nodded slowly. Even after everything? Especially after everything. Silence followed. Gentle. Warm. Then Nathaniel stepped closer. There is something I should have said a long time ago. Genevieve laughed softly. That sentence makes me nervous now. Fair. Snow drifted around them. The world seemed unusually still. I love you. The words settled between them. Simple. Honest. True. Genevieve closed her eyes briefly, as though hearing something she had already known for weeks. You took your time. Nathaniel blinked. That is your response? No, her smile widened. This is. She stepped closer. Close enough that neither had to raise their voice. I love you too. For a moment, neither moved. Neither spoke. The months of uncertainty, the misunderstandings, the secrets, the investigations, all of it seemed to fade into the background. What remained was trust. Hard-earned. Honest. Real. Nathaniel took her hand. Genevieve squeezed gently. No grand audience surrounded them. No ballroom. No public spectacle. Just two people standing beside a stable where their story had unexpectedly begun. Months later, when their engagement was announced, the county celebrated enthusiastically. When they married the following spring, the ceremony reflected everything they valued: family, truth, community, second chances. Victoria stood proudly beside Genevieve. Charles attended as one of Nathaniel's closest friends. Lord Carter watched with tears in his eyes and gratitude in his heart for a forgiveness he knew he had not earned easily. As for Genevieve, she finally received something that had been denied to her for years: recognition. Not because she married a duke. Not because society approved. Because people finally saw her clearly. The woman who uncovered the truth. The woman who chose courage over comfort. The woman who remained kind when bitterness would have been easier. And Nathaniel never forgot the first day he met her. The day a determined young woman looked at a man she believed was a stable hand and casually ordered him to saddle her horse. Looking back, he often thought it was the finest command he had ever obeyed.